Wonderful. Thank you, Daisy.
You got it. Let me know just when to switch to the next slide and then we'll be good.
Okay. I think you can go ahead and push the next frame button. No, sorry, your arrow. That's perfect. You found it on the computer. Even better. Okay. So, why do I use audiovisual? Again, my background is in teaching media, but I use this even in my non-media courses. And I use it because it's a different method of composition for students, one that they are both familiar with and not familiar with in terms of an academic setting. So it's useful for them because they come knowing some of it, but it's also something different from them. It's not their regular essay. It's not, any kind of term paper, but it gets them to think through the material then in a different way and have to present it for a new audience. So it puts a fresh spin on that material and on that presentation of the research. We're using accessible technology. So what I'm trying to do is get technology that's available to students via their laptops or via smartphones or iPads or things like that. Anything that is, for the most part, free to use is really what I try to get my students to use. Again, I want to demystify the process of audiovisual composition, but I don't want it to be a burden to those students. Knowing these things are going to be very useful tools for the future, regardless of where they go and what they do. We are just so engaged in our digital lives at this point that understanding how to create good audio communication or good video communication is going to be really important for them. And it promotes agency in their learning. They get to not only think about, how do they present their research in terms of words, but with video, they also are thinking about how do I present this with images? How do I think about what it is that I want to learn and how I want to approach that? Okay, next slide, please. So getting started, the first thing I like to do is determine the purpose. I want to make sure that the projects I'm setting up are not just because I want you to create a podcast or I want you to create a video. It has to really align with the course objectives, with the learning goals. And then I'm going to create specific learning outcomes for this project. So thinking through, what is it that the technology is going to add to that research presentation? I'm also going to assess that student access. Like I said, I'm really trying to focus on technology that is accessible to students through their smartphones, through laptops, is free. And if I'm working with a student population who lives in a place where Wi-Fi connections are not as strong as I'd like, really rural populations or things like that, then I need to take that into consideration that maybe this project needs to look different, or I need to be able to give access to more tools myself. Creating clear instructions is also important. Again, a lot of students have used some of these tools. Certainly they're creating TikTok videos, things like that. But creating clear guidelines on, okay, so this project is to present your research, but it's not a TikTok video. And what do those differences look like? And then taking time in class to show students the tools you're using is a really good way to start and to get them to experience those tools. Next. Oh, next. Thank you. Okay, so we'll start with podcasting. Podcasts it's gained traction in the recent years because technologies have become increasingly mobile and capable of supporting audio recording and editing. Podcasts began to grow with popularity as a teaching practice in higher ed in the early 2000s, and significant research really focuses on the podcast as a composition tool where students create their own content. Lee et al. Have stated that podcasting is a powerful way of stimulating both individual and collective learning, as well as supposing social processes of perspective taking and negotiation of meaning that underpin knowledge creation, end quote. So podcasts serve as a composition medium that's often new to students. Even though they may be more familiar with audio recording through their media that they use and consume every day, it's still different than a lot of the stuff that they're used to, and it's certainly different than written essays or in-person speeches. So podcast composition, while it's related to written composition practices and those spoken composition practices, it's different in some capacities because students will rely more on outlines and notes to have a conversation rather than reading complete papers or lectures. Additionally, as a classroom project, it's made possible, again, with that advancement of technology, the applications and the appliances, because they're available and they're prevalent. Okay. Thank you for reading my mind. Oh, I had that on a slide. So I do recommend that article if you're looking for more on podcasting. So when we're creating podcasts, I often have students use Garageband as a first medium for editing because Garageband is freely available on all Apple devices. And when I do my podcast projects, I often break students into groups of 3 to 4 students. And generally speaking, at least one of them has an iPhone. Garageband, the app is very accessible, super easy to use for students. And so they can record it right there on their phone. Those iPhones these days have really, really strong audio recording capabilities. So we're lucky that the technology has become so small and so accessible that we're able to do this. If students don't have access to Garageband or they're not iPhone or Mac users, then I'll suggest things like Audacity, or there's some other phone apps that are specifically for Androids. But Anchor, Soundtrap, and SoundCloud are all good hosting sites as well. So depending on where you want your student podcast to live, those are good tools to know. Next. Okay. So in my classes, I do 2 different types of podcasts. I do an interview podcast and I do an essay podcast. So the interview podcast is, well, I'll give you a little preview before I talk more about that. If you'll go to the next page, please. Oh, maybe it's not going to play on this one. So
From
interview
taking orders
podcasts really
and
focus
making coffee,
on
tea, and other drinks, baristas work to maintain a good customer's relationship and put Starbucks as one of the most profitable business nowadays.
Hi, well, my name is Cordelia Villalpando. I'm currently 20 years old. I'm from Monterrey, Mexico, and this August I started working as a Starbucks barista in the Starbucks of the Bloom Library. Well, in the summer, I started really experimenting with drinks. So I would do like my own matcha tea and like my chai teas. And I would, like when my mom would invite her friends, I would like make them drinks. So I was like, oh, maybe I
Thank you,
should
Daisy.
work
If you
at a
hit
Starbucks.
the
Some of my
forward
friends
button,
worked there
we'll get to the same
last
slide.
year.
Oh, maybe once.
Hi guys, welcome back to the 3 Gen Zs. The podcast.
Sorry, can you go back one? I tried to set this up. So there,
Sorry, Amanda.
so there are 2 slides, but I think it's a little hard to do from another computer. Oh no, totally fine. So the interview podcasts, I base them on process of interviewing, asking questions, and then getting them to think about, okay, so if this is going to play on the radio, what's going to be the piece that really draws the audience in? How do we craft a narrative out of that gives that person's story? So they're working with others to tell the story. And then they can collect ambient sounds, like you heard the shaking of the drink, you heard the ice cubes falling. So thinking through, how do we get stories out of interviews that people are going to want to hear? this can be used in a variety of contexts. I could see it certainly being used in history courses, or any course really where you want to get to know someone better, or you want, maybe you're using it in a capstone course where students want to interview their potential, like the job they want to have. They want to interview somebody who has that job right now. And this would be a great way to then use what they learn to present that to the rest of the class. Okay, so the next one is essay podcasts, and hopefully it'll start playing again.
Back to the 3 Gen Zs, the podcast where we,
Isaac,
Jalissa,
and Brittany,
give you our take on topics requested by you, our listeners. Today, we are sponsored by Autobox. In today's episode, we are going to talk about something a little more serious that happens all around us that you may or may not realize is going on with those closest to you. This topic relates to each and every one of us, and we believe it's good to know how to communicate and recognize the signs.
we are going to talk about how you can help someone else get out of contemplating suicide using different communication skills.
some of the most powerful and significant communication you will ever send and receive will not involve words at all. It'll be the nonverbal communication.
Isn't that from the book, The Art of Communication?
Thank you. So the essay podcasts are focused on a scholarly subject. This one was done in an intro to communication course. So the topic they chose was how to talk to people about mental health issues. And again, so this one, unlike the first one was done as a solo project. This is one that was done in a group of 3. And it's a conversational way to approach an academic topic. So again, it gets students thinking about something that's important to them in a different way. My students got to choose what they wanted to talk about for this project. So I had this one, I had some on sports communication, I had some on being duolingual. It's a great way to do a variety of pieces. It really does promote that student agency then if you let them choose what it is that they want to discuss. And that can be within reason. So, if you have a literature course and you are only studying, contemporary American authors or something like that, they get to choose within that then who they want to speak about. But it's a good way to get them thinking through, what does that conversational approach look like? The conversational approach may also be more accessible to many people who want to know more about the topic, rather than academic papers can sometimes be a little bit denser, right? So having a conversational approach gives more people a chance to hear about the topic, and because it's digital, you have a way to share it. So if you wanted to share some of these conversations on your department's webpage, or even do a teaser video about some of them on an Instagram or things like that, you have that available to you. At the end of this, we'll talk more about, how do we look at this in terms of assessment and things like that, to really make sure that we're getting the actual content from these podcasts. The podcasts always have a specific component of how much research is required and how they need to cite their sources, and do that in a way that's conversational can sometimes be a little hard for them, but it does get them thinking through, okay, so how would I naturally bring up these authors or these topics or in a conversation with others? Next. Okay, so the next thing we're going to to talk about are video essays. And you can go to the next slide. So one video piece that I work on is digital storytelling. Digital storytelling and video essays have been shown to increase levels of engagement in active learning and heighten academic success in ways that engage students differently than again, those traditional print-based literacy composition practices. Research has really shown that students who engage with digital storytelling, video production, reach greater levels of academic achievement, motivation, and retention of learning. And it can additionally increase academic achievement, especially for at-risk students, through a different version of writing skills, often involving their family or others close to them to support that learning process, and an awareness of how to use these tools for future educational and career opportunities. So as a composition practice, there's a variety of benefits, including it's a great platform for meaning making. It helps to eliminate some of the hierarchy in a classroom that's traditionally dominated by maybe, the sage on the stage kind of lecture mode. And it promotes multimodal learning and digital literacy development. So digital stories use written text, images, and speech, and often music to reveal a certain piece of whatever it is that they're trying to learn. But they're using these multiple modalities layered together in a composition where they're assembling all of that text, image, video, audio, music in a process of construction where students are really creating the research that they want to share. So I will let you go to the next page. So some tools to create video, Adobe Spark, iMovie, Windows Movie Maker, Animoto, and WeVideo. These are all really great, easily accessible, easy to use programs. And for the most part, they're free. Adobe Spark may have just changed so that you need an account now. WeVideo, there's a free version and a really inexpensive, not free version that eliminates their watermark. iMovie, Windows Movie Maker, those are the ones that come, standard on your computers for the most part. Again, very simple setup to use, often a drag and drop kind of timeline, and you can record right in the program. So simple process to actually create the video. Many of these also have smartphone apps that you can also use to make short videos. Next. Okay, so I've done 3 different styles of videos with my students. The first one is personal stories. I do this a lot in my intro to communication courses, sometimes in my, in a capstone course or upper level course where I need them to think about a story that's really closely connected to something that we're talking about. Our school has a defining moments campaign, and personal stories of this sort work really well based on a moment. So in my intro to communication course, I have them start off with a personal story, because it's a good way to just get them talking, to get them thinking about communicating. Public speech is still one of the number one fears from a lot of people. So giving them something where they don't have to do outside research, where the research is really their own experience, can be a good way to do that. Interviews are another approach that can go into the movie format. Again, working with that person to really give a different understanding of what their research could look like. How does that interview take place? I'll show you 2 different examples of that. And then you can also use these for lightning talks, which are really great. I don't believe I have an example of that out today, but a lightning talk is a short 5, 6, 7 minute presentation, something that's really short, and video can be a great way to really get them thinking about a specific topic and to think about through, how do I give this talk in a really quick and easily digestible format. Okay, so I'm actually, Daisy, gonna have you skip the very first one and go to this. Yeah, so skip this one.
Is this the one you want me to say?
You may need to skip it again. Thank you. So this is an example of a personal story. Yes. So this one was created in a rhetoric course. And the student, you'll see, made her own, video here. She said she just, stuck her phone way up high. She balanced it so that they could see her writing and drawing.
My sophomore year of college, I was having a really hard time recovering from an abusive relationship
Daisy,
from high school.
I think we
and I
need
was really frustrated with myself for
sound.
not being where I thought I should be in my healing process. See, I always imagined my healing process would be linear. I'd heal a little bit every single day and then.
Can you hear it now? It's showing on my end that I am sharing sound.
Suddenly, I wouldn't even be effective
Yes,
anymore. But that is not
we
how
could
it was
hear
going.
it just a second ago.
It actually looked a lot more like this. Some days I felt like I was getting worse, and I was still terrified of being alone with men. When I came back from school, I went on a date and yes. So the day comes and he picks me up and he drives me to a place called Kelly Park, which is 1 hour away from my house. We get there, we're in the middle of nowhere, it's late, nobody is around, and the park is not even technically open. Fear creeps in, but I was trying to be normal, so I push it away. We begin to drive deeper and deeper into the forest, and he finally explains where we're going. He wants to show me this cool mud hole, but we're gonna need to get out of the car and walk to get there. He walks over to my door and opens it because he's a gentleman. Oh, and also because the door doesn't open from the inside, so I was trapped in this strange student's 97 Jeep Cherokee in the forest. So he goes to grab a jacket for me from his trunk, and he reveals an assortment of tools and axes underneath. Doesn't really explain why they're there, and then just closes the trunk. And it hits me. I am definitely about to be murdered. But then he just begins walking down the path to the mud hole. We stare at it, then he says, well, I guess it's really too dark to see it, and then we turn around and head back to the car. At this point, you're probably wondering why I was going along with this and why I wasn't scared. The thing is, I was scared. I was always scared. And when you're always scared, it's sometimes difficult to interpret whether your fear is valid. The level of panic you imagine you would feel in this scenario, I was feeling it. I was feeling it all the time. But what was I supposed to do? Run off into the woods alone? As you've probably guessed by now, I was not murdered. In fact, up until this point, this was the best date I had ever been on. When you have PTSD or when you've been hurt by anyone or anything really badly, your brain creates a narrative. My brain expected that all vulnerability would lead to punishment, so it triggered panic in any situation with perceived vulnerability. Up until that point, my trauma management style was to never put myself into a vulnerable situation. But this night disrupted that narrative. It weakened those associations that my brain had with trauma. I learned that just because someone could take advantage of me doesn't necessarily mean that they will. But there's no way to completely rewrite this narrative. I think I might always feel a little bit scared when I'm around guys, but that night I was vulnerable and it was okay. And sometimes okay is the best thing that you can ask for.
Thank you, Daisy. Okay, so sorry if there were some sync issues with that. But what I wanted to really show you was that students get creative in this. So this girl did essentially, some animation, some hand-drawn things. In actually, Daisy, we do have time, I think. So if you go back to that first video, we'll play just the beginning of it. But this one is a great way to just look at a personal story told through images, which is sometimes the easiest thing for students to grasp. And if we just scan those images, or if they're digital at this point, they have those readily available and accessible to them. Okay.
Without music, life would be a mistake. Middle school can be a difficult time in every young boy or girl's
Daisy, I
life,
don't have
either
sound
academically
again.
or socially. I have a
Sorry.
I believe the sound is
struggled with
running
academics as well as
behind.
some social
Sorry,
skills
everyone.
as far back as I can remember. However, my 5th grade music class allowed me to develop a love for education and value my individual creativity. My passion for music sparked
Okay.
around the 5th grade as I made
No,
the decision
that's
to
okay.
transfer schools
Daisy,
in
that's
search for a
good.
better
That's good.
education.
I think it gives the good example. So using those images really gives that point of context for those personal stories. And this presentation is available online as well. So you have access to it. And if you want to watch more of these videos and things, I'm going to just post that in the link, or sorry, post the link in the chat. So this is, the next two are two different approaches to interview videos, and hopefully we can get it to run smoothly here.
She did this all on her own, nothing, with no help from us other than to just support her. And she started in '85, August 1st. That was her mother's birthday, so she decided it was significant for her to start it on that day. And so Janie's was born in August 1st, 1985. And it started off slow. A lot of skeptics. I would like to talk to those skeptics now, but of course, I don't know. They haven't visited us yet. Actually, it's always been on Bandera Road. She started
Thank
at
you, Daisy.
129 Bandera.
I apologize, everyone. I'm having some issues with my computer with sound and everything. Try and get back to where we were.
In that project, the students were learning about businesses, and we wanted to have them partner with local businesses to understand what it was like to own a business in. That's perfect. It's perfect right where you are. So this next one is, we have a group of elders on campus who are all of the Marianist religion. And so we're also looking for ways to really preserve those stories and make those available for folks on campus, but also in the Marianist community broadly. So this is an example of this. The last recording you saw, the interview was done live. It was on camera. This recording was only done through audio. And then the student worked with her partner to find images that would work. The little cartoons that you see were drawn by the sister in this video.
Sister Derry Kim. How did I become a Marianist? I'm a convert. And as a Protestant, I didn't know anything about religious life. And so I became a religious, but I didn't
You can see that
know
this one,
it
again,
was
uses
like,
that
was the
photograph
question that I struggled with from the very
montage.
beginning. When I was about 4 years old, I was playing in the yard chasing yellow butterflies. And I felt somebody looking at me. And I looked all around, didn't see anyone. So when I looked up at the sky, there was a face looking at me and watching me, a man's face. And I didn't know who it was, but he smiled, and so I, went happily playing. So
Thank
I
you, Daisy.
became a Catholic first, and then, I left to be.
Okay. So some additional resources. I have a longer list as well. That's a PDF. That Daisy, if I can send that to you, and would that work to share it that way?
Yes, you can send it to me and we can get it to our marketing team.
Or I can put my, you can also put my email here in the chat. So if you want more photographs, music, programs to use, I tried to attach it into my presentation, but it didn't work. But some of my favorite. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Daisy. So I will get that sent. But one of my favorites is Unsplash. Unsplash is a copyright-free photography website, and it's full of beautiful photographs from professional photographers. It's a great resource for any students who, want to create it. If you want to have students create a video, but you don't want them to use their own photos, or they don't have access to photos or things like that, Unsplash is a great place to go. Nappy and Tonal are the same, focusing really on images that portray BIPOC folks. So I highly recommend checking those out. For music and audio, I recommend checking out the Creative Commons licensed music. Creative Commons is a variety. It's multiple different copyrights, but they are accessible for folks to use. Sometimes you just have to cite the person. Sometimes, you're allowed to change the music. Sometimes you're not. But so really take a look at which copyright you're using in that. But Jamendo, Freesound, SoundCloud are great places for that. And then the Internet Archive also has a great variety of historical artifacts that can be used both for video and for music. Oh, sorry, next. I was trying to click myself. Okay, so as promised, one of the biggest questions I get in this is, how do we think about assessment? And it's a hard thing, because essentially some of the stuff is new and some of it is hard, and some of it is you're going to have students who have more natural talent towards it, and others who are going to have to work harder on building that natural talent. So it's sort of a question of, how do we evaluate art? For me, because I know I'm working with students who are not often there to learn media, I'm looking at content over quality. I want their recordings to be clear so I can understand them. I want the message to come forward first, but I also leave that room then for creativity, so that they get a chance to really look at what it is they want to do, what it is they want to explore, and how they want to put that into action. But I do recommend having a clear and specific rubric for your assessment. And there's an example rubric if you go to the next slide. So this is an example podcast rubric. Again, I'm looking at, how do I think through the content? So the introduction, the body, the conclusion. I'm also using, again, because this is from a intro to communication course, I'm looking at how are they using their language and voice? How does that communication support what it is they're trying to say? Are they clear? And is there a sense of listenability? Is it, does the flow work? So just like you would think in your traditional essays, is there significant flow? I look at, is the topic specific and appropriate for the audience? Their audience is usually their classmates, but you could think about doing this for a departmental podcast or anything like that. because it's a group project, I have that there's an amount of time speaking. I tell students that they each need to speak for at least 3 minutes, but it doesn't have to be consecutive. So that way I'm really trying to get them to not rely on one person to be speaking the whole time. Make sure that it's in there with their allotted time frame, and then that they're being professional in it, that, you know, while it's a podcast, while it's conversational based, there is a sense of professionalism. They're not, you know, they're just goofing off. You feel that there's a professional quality to it as well. So those are the kinds of things that I'm looking for. They're very similar when we talk about video, looking again at, instead of just, you know, is it clear in terms of the audio, but is the video footage clear? I encourage students not to do handheld video. That's often really complicated and ends up looking, you know, kind of Blair Witch kind of film style, because handheld is hard. So even if students don't have tripods or anything, like the phone clip-on ones can be really easily found these days. They're inexpensive. Or propping your phone or camera up on books or anything like that is also a good way to get that stability. Okay, I believe that that's the end. Daisy, if you want to click to the next. Okay. Yes, so I wanted to make sure I left 15 minutes here for, or, you know, however long we have, for questions that you all might have.
We do only have about 1 minute
so
left.
Feel free to type those into the Q&A, or I don't know if you have permission to unmute, but if you do, you can. Oh, perfect. I'm so sorry. I think I got the time wrong. My apologies for that, folks. If you do have questions, I'm going to put my email here in the chat box. I am at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas. And again, I teach in communication studies. I'm also our co-director for our Community for Teaching and Learning. So really working on different pedagogy techniques. And I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. We appreciate you for all of that wonderful presentation. I apologize to everyone for any technical difficulties we had during it, but hopefully we figured them out well enough that you guys could follow along with the presentation. But I do want to let you know that we will be having another concurrent session that starts at 4 p.m. Eastern time. You can go ahead and view the chat for any links to our next sessions and for our conference website. So that will have a complete list of concurrent sessions and their descriptions. And while accessing the conference website, don't forget to swing by the exhibit hall to say hello to the Hawks team. There you can view a 5-minute demonstration and be entered to win the hourly giveaway. Your choice of a 6-month subscription to Audible, a 1-year subscription to Disney Plus, or a $100 Amazon gift card. And with that, we will see you at your next session. And again, thank you so much, Amanda. That was such a wonderful presentation. And we hope to see you all later on at other sessions.